Hey Mark, thanks a lot for joining for the first episode of Open Source Cafe. Really excited to be here and really excited to have you on the channel as well. Would you like to tell our viewers a little bit more about yourself?
Thank you, Kunal. I'm pleased to be on. So I'm Mark Boost, the CEO and co-founder of Civo, and Civo is a cloud provider focused on Kubernetes. We'll probably talk more about that in a minute, but yeah, I think I'm really pleased to be here and share some of my insights around startup culture.
Most definitely. Like working at Civo has been one of the best experiences of my life. Everyone at the team is really helpful. Shout out to Sayam, Anais, Alex, Sky, Ricky. And I'm learning a lot, and definitely we're going to be talking more about that. And but before we talk about Civo in particular, since this podcast is related to startup culture, can you maybe share a bit more about your previous experiences? I know you have a experience spread across decades and decades. So how did you actually start with technology? What interested you in tech?
Yeah, so I got started playing with computers when I was quite young, about 8-10 years old. My dad brought home first sort of personal computer when I was quite young, and I showed an interest in that. He was a computer programmer himself, so he helped me learn about computers and coding and things. And then I remember him bringing home some modems as well. This is way before the internet was even a thing, and I started showing an interest in these modems, these dial-up modems that that would connect at such a slow speed, and there wasn't a lot you could do back then. But and I ended up building my own bulletin board, which was like I guess it's like in a way an early stage version of the internet. But you could only really connect from one computer to another computer. So both computers would have a modem. I would dial up from my modem, connect to someone else's modem, and I'd be able to access their bulletin board or vice versa. And you were able to do things like drop a mail, and then if you disconnected, someone else could connect on and then collect that mail. Or you could download some free software, and there might be some games that you could play. Just things like that you could do. So I used to run that bulletin board as a youngster, really, and that's really where my first interesting real passion for computers and networking, if you like, and that kind of stuff came about. And then I had a bit of a change in path, really. I got involved in motorsport and originally racing go-karts, and then eventually moving into car racing, into single-seaters, working my way up through various formulas up to Formula 3. So it got to a fairly high level, but the sponsorship to actually compete was a lot of money. You needed a lot of sponsorship. So I had to, after about 5 years of doing motorsport, I had to call it a day. And at that point, I was about 19, 20 years old, and I had to make a decision, what am I going to do with my life from here? And that's really where I fell back onto the computer background, and I decided to start a company doing web design. And I think that was the early stage of the internet. This is about 1999, and I think a lot of companies that got involved in the internet early on, that's how they started out. They were web design companies to start with, and then evolved from there. And that's really was my story. I quite quickly come up with the idea of registering domain names as a business. So people who needed their first domain name could come along and register a domain name, and then they could build out a website after that, and we could do the whole website hosting and things like that. So I launched a company called Low Cost Names at the time, and eventually it was rebranded to LCN. And that grew over a period of about 20 years to be the fifth largest domain and hosting company in the UK. So hosting about 400,000 websites. And then I exited that business in 2019, which was really what led me on to starting Civo. Really, that was like the next thing for me in that sense, which I'm happy to discuss more.
Yeah, I first of all, I did not know that you were a Formula One, like you were into racing and stuff. So that's very, very interesting and impressive. Also, you mentioned like founded, you got involved like in like 1999. That's a really long time ago. I was born in 1999, so for me it's very long. But so listening about your experiences, have you ever had a chance of for working for a like not the startup culture, like let's say a big company that is already like a few 100,000 people or something?
I personally haven't. No, I mean, I literally went from from the motor racing straight into
Mhm.
starting my own business, and
Mm.
I was 19, 20 years old. So I've never done an interview for someone or try to get a job or anything like that. I straight away
Mm.
just wanted to get into running something. The
Mm.
internet was coming along. It felt like a great thing to get into. I was still
Mm.
living with my parents, and I just set up a business running from the spare bedroom.
Mm.
And it was doing web design, but also in the early stages, I was building computers for people as well. So I
Mm.
was buying all the different component parts, all the RAM and CPUs and all the actual desktop chassis and the monitors, and
Mm.
I was putting those all together, and then I was selling those to friends and family as well. So I guess early on, when you first start a business, you try different things. You're trying to make money. You're trying to make things work, and you, in some
Mm.
ways, trying to see what sticks and works, and the things that don't work, you move away from. And I think the web design element led me into the hosting and domain names, because
Mm.
every client that was a web design customer needed a website address and needed to host it somewhere.
Mm.
So when we were getting our clients ask us to provide their domain names and hosting, it was a natural process to almost build the hosting and the domain name division as a separate business. And after about 6 months or 12 months, we dropped the web design altogether and just focused on the domain names and hosting side of things.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And before we talk more about like the startup culture versus a really large company culture, let's talk a bit more about Civo. So if you could just share about the Civo journey, like how did it start and what was the vision behind it?
Yeah, and there's probably a bit in between as well. I won't go into too much detail, but I've actually been involved in about 5 or 6 startups. So along that journey, after LCN or during LCN, I diversified and launched a data center business where people could host their equipment in our own data centers, called Server Choice. Set up a networking connectivity business for high-speed connectivity, which was called AI Networks. Another one, cybersecurity business called Bulletproof, which is still running, and I'm still heavily involved in that one. So yeah, there's quite a few startups, and I think I keep coming back to doing startups because I feel they're very fun, rewarding, challenging. It's exciting when you're going on a journey and you're building something from scratch, and that path to try and succeed, and that collaboration as a small team and seeing all that hard work come to fruition and growing together really gets me kind of excited. So I think I keep gravitating back to sort of startups.
Yeah, thanks a lot for sharing. And what was like you mentioned, you were involved in like 4 to 5 startups, different startups. What inspired you to start Civo?
Civo, I guess the main inspiration, it actually started, we'd already started the work when LCN, when I was still involved with LCN before I sold it. Civo started about a year before that. And I guess because I knew the LCN kind of chapter was coming to an end and we were potentially going to exit that business, I wanted to have something ready to kind of get my teeth stuck into. So for me, that's really where it started. It was kind of looking for that next thing. And the reason I guess we decided to focus on Kubernetes was with LCN, it always felt like we were a follower, not a leader. We were not a big innovator in a way. You've got to imagine when we started, we had very small budgets. very small team. We had to grow gradually,
Mm.
organically, bit by bit. But you had some really big companies in our sector, like GoDaddy or One-on-One and people like that had huge budgets. So in a way, in terms of the tech innovation, although we had a good product and the customer service was first class, it's the best in the UK for LCN and what we offered. In terms of the innovation, we were never really a leader. So what I wanted to do is when we built Civo, I wanted us to be an innovator. And if you think about it, it's still the same sort of business as LCM was, which is a hosting business. We're hosting people's, not necessarily websites like we were on LCM, but we are hosting all sorts of applications and different different workloads and things. So my background is kind of used to that scale business of building out and scaling out a hosting business. But this time we're doing it more at the cutting edge, and we have some funds behind us because of the LCN exit. We were able to take some of that money and invest it into Civo, and actually spend more on the R&D and really sort of push the limits and be an innovator. So I mean, that's what got me excited about starting Civo, that innovation piece.
Most definitely, and like we were talking previously as well. So what I'm seeing, what I'm trying understanding from this is that you mentioned something regarding when it was 1999 and internet was just coming, and there were so many startups related to internet starting. So that happened because of what was going in the particular domain in tech. So for example, right now Kubernetes services are very popular, and now we have Civo, for example. So is it the pattern related to what the users are currently actively involved with behind the idea of the startup?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when LCM was started, like you said, back in, it was the year 2000 when we actually launched the LCM brand. All people wanted was a brochure website, a sales website. Every website was just a brochure. There was nothing clever about what people were doing and how they were being hosted, and there was no demands to scale things out infinitely and how much resources and that kind of stuff. They were all very simple. So it's amazing how it's changed over the years, and I think that aligns again back to the innovation, but also I guess when we looked at Civo, we were thinking, well, what's coming next? What's the next big thing? And then I guess we've looked at that, and we've kind of doubled down on Kubernetes, but we've taken a different perspective on it. As we're trying to be a bit different, and we're trying to carve out our own niche in the way that we do things, and we're using K3S as our distribution within the Civo, and that has many advantages in terms of the cluster launch times, and that adds to our kind of simplicity and that developer experience that we're trying to create as well. So I think there's innovation in tech, but there's some innovation in the way that we're just trying to make that developer experience really good.
Yeah, most definitely. And for all the viewers who are watching, you can start your Kubernetes cluster in 1 minute 30 seconds or less than that. And all the links are in the description. Make sure you check out Civo. And like Mark mentioned, we're trying to do something different over here. And that is the reason we have a lot of nice initiatives coming your way, which I won't ruin, obviously. So make sure you check out the links in the description and to stay updated. So now let's talk about the main thing, which was the startup culture versus working at a big tech company. So can you maybe share a bit more about that? What are the advantages of working at a startup?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I've never worked for a big company, but I've certainly employed lots of people over the years that have worked for big companies, and I can share some of the experience of what people have said to me and the difference in the culture, that kind of stuff. And I think it also depends about what stage you are in your career as well. I think can change things sometimes. But certainly, if you were looking to get started, looking for maybe your first job out of university or your first job or whatever, and I think from my experience that the opportunities in larger companies, there's some great opportunities, but you are going to be in a situation where maybe the work that you're going to be doing is not going to be so varied. It's going to be on a particular thing, probably not going to give you a lot of access to anything too important in reality, and it's going to be quite rigid in what the sort of work and the varied work that you're going to do. So I think that's one of the big differences, certainly. And I think you've probably seen this from working at Civo. We're very open, no matter what stage of people's career they're in. If they've got good ideas and they want to try those, or then we're very open to allowing people to grow, empowering them to do their own thing and bring their own ideas, but also allowing them to get involved in any area of the business where they show an interest as well. So I think just having that smaller team and gives people a chance to kind of work with all the different team members across the board, and then find out what they enjoy, and then if people enjoy work, then they give their best work as well. So that's a bit of a summary for maybe newcomers.
Yeah, I could not agree more on that, because I have heard that because I'm currently a student, so even in for students like internships, for example, so they don't even get to work on the core tech. So forget about employees. Forget about interns. Like if employees are not getting to work on the main core tech, because you mentioned there are separate teams for separate products in big companies. Obviously this is not for every company, but this is certainly something that I have seen in some of the previous internships that I have gotten, and some of my friends have gotten. So they're working on some third-party tools or something like that. And definitely, I also agree with the point you made regarding working at a startup, like having a freedom to choose what stuff you would like to work on, because if people like the work that they do, then they are more efficient. So that's totally true. And thanks a lot for sharing, Mark. And a bit more about smaller teams that you mentioned. So much more easier to get to know people in your particular team when you are in a smaller team. So it's sort of like the communication part that is also enhanced, I believe. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. And probably also that you get to, speak to everyone at every level, So, as we have regular conversations, and I'm sure you speak to Andy, our CTO, and Dinesh, the director of innovation, and Alex, our principal engineer. So you're getting to speak to quite senior people within the business and interact with them, learn from them, and I think that would probably be one of the big differences as well in a startup compared to a more established company. You're only going to go a couple of steps to a manager, and then maybe another manager beyond the manager.
That's true.
And then that's it. You're really going to get access to the founders, the people that key people that are driving the product roadmaps, and the key people in the marketing and different people like that are coming up with the ideas and all the visionary stuff. So I think that's quite a nice feature as well. Hopefully that kind of maybe enthusiasm and things like that from the senior leadership team kind of rubs off on people, and you feel more of a sort of family atmosphere, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and this is what intrigued me quite a lot, which is getting to interact even with the most senior people in a particular startup, because it's not just in my domain that I'm interacting, it's across various domains. So if I want to learn about how the entire company functions, what are the various teams which are required to run a successful startup, definitely that is something that I'm learning quite a lot. Thanks a lot for sharing, Mark. Would you maybe also, the next question is, share a bit more about the challenges that people might face when they're starting out their particular company?
In terms of them founding themselves or someone joining a startup?
Exactly. It's founding themselves.
It's definitely different nowadays than it was, say, 20 years ago when I started. I think it's harder, for one, because there's most ideas, you think of an idea, and then more often than not, someone's already doing it, and
Yeah.
they've probably got some funding as well. And so it seems that nowadays it's very difficult unless you've got some funding behind you to really bring that idea to fruition, and especially if it's a tech idea, because you've got to. Not only you've got to go and try and build that and the time it takes to build it, and do you need to employ some people to help you build it, developers and things, but then you've got to get that to market, and how do you then market that, and have you got the right experience? Maybe you've got a good idea and you're a techie, but maybe you haven't got the marketing experience to know how to get that out there. So I think it was a little bit easier when I started, that it wasn't quite as costly, and there wasn't quite as much competition. I think you could come up with an idea and you could run with it, and you could bootstrap it to a certain degree on your own. But now it's a more competitive world. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is that sort of startup funding, probably, to get you going. So maybe if you're young, I'd recommend if you not to I was quite lucky when I started, because I lived with my parents, and so I didn't have any kids or mortgage property to pay for or anything like that. So it seemed like quite low risk to me to go and start a business, because I was still living with my parents, and they were giving me food and looking after them, put a roof over my head and all that kind of stuff. So if it all went wrong, I would still be looked after. So but I think it's more challenging if say you're older and you're going to start a business, and you're going to leave a job. Maybe you're going to leave a job with a good salary, or maybe you've got some kids, and you've got a property and things like that. It's a bigger risk, and then you're probably definitely going to need funding behind you, because what happens if it fails, and that kind of stuff. So I think that's one of the toughest thing is getting that initial funding. But there are ways I think people can go about that. Even Civo, we haven't gone down the route of approaching VC funding. We've gone to some private investors first, and we've kind of demonstrated our idea to them. People we know, people in our kind of LinkedIn groups, and people that we've got. I've got to know over the years, and some of our other employees have got to know over the years, and we've reached out to them, explained what we're doing. And then we're able to get some startup funding to help on our journey. So there are ways you can do that. There's obviously crowdfunding nowadays, lots of other things, but I think that's certainly the biggest thing and most challenging thing to get right is the funding part of it.
Most definitely, yeah. And you also mentioned something regarding ideas. So that's like the next question: how do we actually find ideas? But the thing I want to also say over here is that even though there's a particular product already doing a particular thing, I mean, I have seen examples that other people are doing the same thing and their startup is also very successful. So for example, like online services, like online websites. So it's like Amazon.com. Here in India, we have like Amazon, we have like Flipkart.com, we have like Walmart, and there's like Myntra.com, and there's like so many other .coms. Everyone is doing the same thing. It's just basically like what Amazon was doing initially. Amazon was the very first one. So still these startups became successful. So we're talking about, let's talk about like some Kubernetes services. So I have often seen that there's a unique selling point. For example, at Civo, it's like blazing fast cluster speeds. We're using K3s, and we have like simple UI, and the team is great, and all the other services are pretty awesome. Check out the marketplace for those of you who are watching. It's also a very great addition. So what do you think about that from the idea point of view?
Yeah, there's always room in most market sort of sectors for more than one company, and I've always thought of myself as an ideas person, and I think even though someone might be doing well, there's always an opportunity to come up with a different idea that is, a different version, or something that you're doing that just makes you stand out in a different way and provides a level of functionality or a level of customer service or ease of use that maybe the dominant competitor in that area is not providing. So I said a little while ago that I think it's almost hard nowadays to think of any idea that someone hasn't already done in some kind of way. But I think how you execute that idea and actually bring it to life and put your own take on it, I think can set one company out from others, and make them. And that's what we're trying to do at Civo. I think it's in some ways we're not doing anything too dissimilar to a lot of our competitors, but in terms of it's a Kubernetes service at the end of the day, behaves like any other Kubernetes service. So, but what we're trying to do is do our take on that, make it easier, make it quicker. Really, I guess our USP is taking away all the obstacles that you have that you might experience with other providers, and make it a very seamless and easy journey to getting started. But not just then, the way that we then maintain things going forward, the way you interact with us should be easy. All those hurdles along the way that you might experience elsewhere, that we try to take away and improve that developer experience.
Most definitely, I totally agree, and thanks a lot for sharing, Mark. The next question is a bit more about working at startups. So, first question is, let's talk about Civo. So, when you're hiring, what do you look for?
I would say, first and foremost, I think it's about the. I guess if we're taking it back to before, if someone was interviewing, or we're taking it back to before that, as if they're just approaching to try and get get an interview. Because I think it depends. If it's more about how do you get your foot in the door, how do you initially provoke some interest and make sure that you do get an interview, then I think what I'm looking for is probably professionalism in terms of the way people present themselves and the way they present their resume, the way potentially what they've done as well in terms of how do they run their own blog. I always look at people's social media profiles, what they're up to. If it was a tech focused job, I'll be looking for looking on GitHub and seeing what they've done, and looking at if they've wrote about certain technical articles themselves or contributed, what communities that they're active in, and things like that as well. So trying to build a picture around that person and their sort of passion. What we've done at Civo is pretty much most of our hires recently have been people from our community. So they've joined our Slack community. We've had a chance to see them firsthand, how they've contributed, how they've helped Civo, how they may have supported other users. You get to see really a number of things, in terms of their competency at their own, subject, but also, how they help others, and that shows different characteristics in terms of the personality and things. And we've hired David that way, Alejandro. That's how I met Siam originally. Kunal, Anais. Yes. So I'm sure there's more. Even I can't think off the top of my head, but most of our hires have been through our community. So maybe that's one of the key bits of advice for people, that if you're looking to get involved with different startups, maybe join those communities, or those projects that you're interested in, those companies that you're interested in. Join their Slack communities if they've got one, and contribute. And you might stand out. And even if you don't stand out, I'm sure if you eventually approach them, and you kind of show them what you've been doing and how you've been supporting the community, it will go a long way to demonstrating your capabilities. So that would definitely be a big recommendation, is to get involved in those communities.
Yeah, most definitely. It also shows that one is interested, and totally agree with you. If it's a tech job, then looking at the projects that they worked on, blogs and everything. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Thanks for sharing, Mark. And the next question is something that I've gotten quite a lot. So the question is, where to actually look for these startups? Because they are not. It's not like not everyone in the world knows about it. Everyone knows that, let's say if you want to apply to Google, everyone knows, Google, Amazon, big companies. But how do we actually find startups that are doing such amazing work is the question.
Yeah, I think that there's a few ways. Again, get involved in communities and maybe places even like the CNCF, and you'll be able to see what cool projects are coming along. What software is out there. I'm sure you hear about what they're up to and if they're hiring and things like that. If you follow some of these communities, so certainly get involved in things like that. And I mean, in terms of as I mentioned, Civo, we are recruiting from our community, so making sure that you do get involved in specific projects that you're interested in. So if you've got a passion for, I don't know, front end development, then make sure you follow the various different big projects that are out there involved in front end development, and actually get involved in the different communities that relate to that. If it's machine learning, then go and follow all the machine learning cool startups and that get involved in their communities in that sort of in that kind of way. So I think I suppose just summarizing, I think it's about it's changing nowadays from maybe only 20 years ago when I got started, and it was kind of you had to look for a job or not look for one, but you would have to wait for one to be advertised and then kind of almost go out and apply for that job. But I think you can be a lot more proactive nowadays. I know certainly as a CEO myself, if a good resume lands in my email, with a very well written covering letter, there's always a chance that I may look at hiring that person if they tick all the right boxes. So obviously there's got to be a time when we are hiring, but at the same time, I think if you make yourself stand out, and I think it's really important to write a very personal letter, separate covering letter, if you're interested in applying for a certain company. Explain about your background, what your passion is, why you're applying, and make sure it's very professionally written. And I think that shows a lot that someone's, willing to go out of their way to kind of, find themselves a job rather than the approach of just waiting for a job to sort of fall in your lap, in a way. So it's being that proactive, building your own profile, being very, presenting yourself very professionally, and going from there.
Yeah, I can't even imagine waiting for a job posting and then actually then applying for that. that those days would be things have definitely changed, and we are much more we have a lot of resources at our hands. So yeah, social media is great in these terms for networking with other people. So yeah, I totally agree, and I would also recommend being active on LinkedIn, Twitter, reaching out to people, and not just networking with people in order to get a job in the future. The way I network is I actually am interested in in what work they are doing. For example, I got introduced via Sanyam. I was in network of Sanyam and talked to him way before that, months and months before that, and here we are. Cool. So I remember previously you also mentioned something regarding there's a remote culture that is currently going on, right? Because of the whole pandemic situation and everything. And one thing that is crucial with remote culture is good communication skills. So you can just comment on that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is very important. We're a UK company. I think probably the same can be said for, say, US companies. Obviously, English being a primary language, and most of our team, or not most actually, about 50-50, but I think 50% of our team are UK based. And yeah, so having to communicate effectively with the senior leadership team, with the rest of the teams, that it's really important that we have good communication skills. The remote, like you said, the remote work in nature. We use Slack heavily, so good written skills is kind of key in that sense. But then we do a lot of Zoom calls, Slack calls, that kind of stuff as well. And I think sometimes the challenges that we've had especially when you can imagine getting into some quite technical subjects. That the communication skills, if we're asking, say, a developer to develop some code for us, if the understanding is not there, if they haven't really comprehended exactly what we wanted, then maybe that wastes everyone's time. We have to redo things and stuff like that. So I think that communication element is really important, and we work hard to make sure that up front we try and ensure people understand. I think it's really important as well to always ask questions, not be afraid to ask questions, to make sure that people do understand things before they, crack on and build things and stuff like that. So, and also regular feedback. I think it's important to make sure you're checking in and you're getting regular feedback and making sure you're on track with the project and things like that. So, I think like you said, we've got people from Malaysia, India, Cuba, Germany, America, Bangladesh. Lots of people from all different countries, and they're all on different time zones as well, which makes it quite interesting as well. So I think we have to communicate well to make sure it's all going to work smoothly. Which can be interesting at times with all different time zones, but also fun. I think you probably notice it as well, that it seems the way that we've got people in every different time zone, there's always something happening. So I quite look forward to waking up in the morning and, everyone in the kind of Asian area there's things been happening. There's all posts there. There's some exciting new things that have been happening. And then, as you're going to bed, the American, David in America, has kind of been working on something, and it's kind of, so it's quite. I find it quite exciting with the nice sort of diverse zones and background that we have.
I believe the Europe time zone is best, both in terms of communicating with people in the US, North America region, and in the Asia Pacific region. It's like in the middle, so not too much of a difference, because if I'm communicating with someone in the States, it's like a day and night of difference. But the Europe time zone is like it's hitting the spot. So that's great. All right. So just one last question I have is, what is the Civo vision for long term? Let's say few years down the line.
I think first of all, we want to build out our Kubernetes offering, and we want to gather more traction and build and become recognized and that kind of stuff, which I guess is goes without saying, really. We want to be successful, we want to build that product, we want to get but I know for me personally, what I'm trying to do with Civo, I've run a lot of different businesses, but with Civo I'm trying to really give back with Civo, and I've done fairly well out of business over the years, and I'm really trying to, with Civo, build something that is not just, it's not about me, it's about the team and growing together, and it's growing in an ethical way, being very transparent, giving back to open source, giving back to our community, helping support young people and employing young people and helping them grow and seeing their careers grow, and just trying to, part of our vision is to shape a global community and be ethical and be transparent and empower social and environmental change as well. So for me, it's about a legacy. So maybe one day I can look back, in 30 or 40 years time, and I've got grandkids one day or something, and I can be, look back and be proud of building something that has, great product and everything, but also a great company that employed great people. That helped people's lives, made a difference. That sort of thing would make me really proud. So that's the vision I kind of have long term, is to almost be like the ethical cloud company is kind of how I see it. That is just going that bit further in that way. So great products, great people, and respecting our users and the communities that we work within.
Most definitely, and working at Civo, I can definitely say we are on that track. I think we are already already a great team and empowering so many people. Can't wait to see what we have in store for the future coming years. Thanks for joining, Mark, and it was really great speaking to you. And got to learn a lot, and I'm sure the viewers would also gain a lot of insights from this particular talk. And yeah, really appreciate you joining.
Thank you, Kunal.